Right. So, hey everybody, I'm back on it again, and I've got a little bit of a delay in what I'm saying, but we're going to try to work through this. I'm going to try to ignore the echo that I'm hearing. I've got as a guest Emmanuel, and I've tried before, and we're going to try it again. We're going to make it happen. I'm going to allow Emmanuel to just do the main talking, and hopefully we get a good show out of this. Okay, so without further ado, I want to welcome Emmanuel.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. Mr. Toussaint and I, we have a long history, as he was trying to say earlier. We first started out as high school classmates at Thomas Jefferson High School in East New York, Brooklyn. I think it's close to 25 years ago now. It's been a long time. As he said before, I was quite loquacious, quite florid in my speech. So that had me stand out because I was using a lot of polysyllabic words, and I came to school in 2- and 3-piece suits and a briefcase, as I would run through the hallways with my heavy set briefcase. So there was a lot of, how should I say, kind and not so kind words from from students and teachers alike, especially because at Thomas Jefferson we had a uniform policy. Mm-hmm. So I was one of those smart Alecs who found a way to circumvent the uniform policy. Everybody else had to wear a light blue top and dark blue pants, and I was able to get around that because Miss Frida Homer, she wrote a letter to Mr. Wisher, my math teacher, saying Mr. Reed's dress far exceeds the standard of dress as stated in the uniform policy. So therefore, he is exempted from said policy. So that didn't make me too many friends in high school. I guess my story kind of starts there in Brooklyn. If someone had asked me whether or not I was going to become a teacher, nonetheless a special education teacher coming out of Thomas Jefferson, I'd have told you, hell to the no. But it's just funny the way life works, because teaching and special education in general is something that I kind of just fell into. It wasn't anything that was planned. And it's provided me with such an enriching life, where I get a chance to advocate for others who oftentimes cannot speak for themselves, who cannot articulate for themselves the ideas that they have, the brilliance that they have, whether it's kids with SPLDs, that's specific learning disabilities, such as that are diagnosed, such as autism, such as dysgraphia, dyslexia, the whole dys family. And then I also deal with kids who are considered gifted or highly able. And I also deal with students who are considered twice exceptional, which means that it's somebody who might be very bright. They can have a very high IQ. They can have an IQ of 140 or whatever, but they have underlying learning difficulties like dyslexia or dysgraphia or ADHD. Usually that's the most prevalent combination I see with twice exceptional kids. And then the other part of my story that I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys about is being a world traveler and how I navigate the international space, being a Black intellectual and experiencing different cultures, living in different cultures. So that's something that I'm really excited to talk to you all about.
So tell me about your experience in college, initially, trying to become, an educator. Tell me about your experience there.
So my path to college, when I got out of high school, I have to say now, looking back at it as a 40-year-old, I was quite cocky in high school. I thought that I was the bomb.com. And yes, I was pretty smart and pretty talented, but I did not realize leaving Thomas Jefferson High School that I was actually a big fish in a small pond or a fishbowl. And when I got to Fordham, which I'm proudly representing on my shirt right now and on my hat, because right now I've got the quarantine hair. Um, uh, I realized that when I went to Fordham University, I was not the only smart kid in the room, not by far. I was in a room full of smart kids. So I got my butt thoroughly kicked my first couple of semesters. As a matter of fact, I was on the verge of being asked to leave. And then on top of that, I was dealing with being diagnosed with kidney stones, which for anybody out there who's ever had kidney stones, let me tell you something. You know, when they refer to it as the male equivalent of childbirth, whew, you don't want to know. So I was dealing with that and just having generally poor study habits coming out of high school. Just, you know, having a lot of things come easy for me and me actually having to work for the first time. So I wouldn't advise this for everybody, but I ended up having 4 different majors over the course of 4 years. So I started as a business major, got my teeth kicked in my economics class. I got a D in macro. I was getting an F in micro, and I dropped the class before the grades became official. And I had Professor Randy Hannum at Fordham tell me, you know, Emmanuel, I think maybe business is not the thing for you because, you know, you got financial accounting coming up and statistics. And I know you like to maybe wear a suit to work every day, but maybe you can find something else different to do that'll have you wearing a suit to work every day. So I said, okay, all right, I'll try something different. And at that time, I also thought, well, computers are very popular. So let me try something within the field of technology, but with less math, because it was the math that was killing me in economics. So with that, I tried my hand at information systems my sophomore year. Well, a number of things happened with that. And the professor, he gave me an incomplete, and he left the university, and I did all the work and things. I didn't understand why I got an incomplete. I sat for the final, and the university was unable to contact him, so they didn't know how to resolve the grade. So that being said, that left me stuck. So information systems at Fordham is one of those majors in where you have to do like 16 classes. If you don't start early, you're dead in the water. So what I ended up doing was I had to change my major again. And I ended up really having a chance encounter with Dr. Mark Nason, who became aware of some of the racial tensions and stuff that I was experiencing in the dorms at Fordham. I mean, that's just one of very few negative experiences that I had there. Otherwise, you know, I rep Fordham hard. I had a lovely experience there, but there were some negative things that happened, you know, my freshman year in the dorm and things, and he became aware of it. And, Dr. Nason, he is the chair of African American Studies at Fordham University. But when you see him, you see, you know, a white Jewish guy with, you know, white hair and a white goatee, and then you hear him speak, and he's talking about his FBI file, and, you know, him loving collard greens and fried chicken, and how he dated a black woman for 6 years, and how he was blackballed from his family.
Okay.
So I took like him, like a duck to water, and I became an urban studies major for a year. And, you know, during that time, to just get like my GPA up. And then during that time, I started taking some communication classes as well, and I fell in love. And I said, wow, this is what I should have been doing from the first day I came to Fordham. So after junior year was up, I transferred to communications and media studies. And did quite well. I actually was doing well enough into where I could have been on the Honor Society for Communication and Media Studies if I had started earlier. So yeah, I finished college after 4 majors in 4 years. But honestly, outside of that, I was just really blessed because, like I said, I was pretty smart coming out of high school, and I got a truckload of scholarships and grants. And I tell people all the time, the best time in your life to be poor is just before you go to college. My
How so?
bill for Fordham University. Well, here's the thing. So my bill for Fordham University was $115,000 over the course of 4 years. And I ended up getting enough scholarships and grants, including a band scholarship, and where I played trombone for 4 years for a partial scholarship, and scholarships from the state and the Regents Board and National Honor Society, and all these different things. My bill was $115,000, and I ended up owing $9,700 out of $115,000 in loans. So a large part of that, yes, was me being smart and being talented, but a lot of that was being from a single parent family with 4 kids living in East New York, Brooklyn,
Wow.
being on public assistance and things like that.
So we let me
So
delay let me delay a little bit with you. Do you by chance have headphones?
okay, so here's the thing. I'm using my Chinese phone. So the phone has this silly thing in where you have to use the USB-C type adapter, and I don't have that adapter with me. So I bought headphones. If we were to switch the headphones, I'd have to switch to another phone. So that's the
Okay,
only thing.
let's do that then. Is that perfectly fine?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we can
Let's do
retry
it.
this again.
I'm gonna send you a link so that you join in there, and then I'll close this one. Ain't no sweat.
Okay.
People like it's live. We'll make it happen.
Okay.
So send me a message with the new phone. In the meantime, I'm gonna talk to the folks.
Okay.
So, we got part 1 down with Emmanuel sharing his story. We got a little bit of a delay. Let me mute his mic, see if that helps. All right, do y'all hear me better? Yes, they hear me better. So what y'all were hearing is a little bit of a feedback from his phone. So we're gonna fix this in between our discussion, and I appreciate y'all staying with me. Usually I have a pretty good production, pretty smooth production. He's in China. We've got some things going on, but we're gonna make it happen. Just a little bit of a story, a backstory with myself and Emmanuel. Yes, I grew up in East New York, Brooklyn. Coming straight from the Caribbean, living in a family house with myself and my 5 brothers and 1 sister. My mother raised us and everything like that in East New York, Brooklyn. And so going to Thomas Jefferson High School, the high school that, allowed me the opportunity to, jump from, going from a very poor neighborhood to being able to get a scholarship to go to, was it DePaul University in Indiana? This is 1999, but I met Emmanuel beforehand. So his story and my story are very similar in the sense of, we came from very disadvantaged areas, but we still made it happen. And so that's why I wanted to definitely bring in Emmanuel to come and talk with us today. I'm sending him the, hold on, I'm sending him the link right now to join on with his different phone. So, and, that's the main reason why I have this sort of talk discussion thing going on my page. Not only because, I enjoy talking to people, but I love hearing the stories and sharing the knowledge and everything like that that comes from different folks. You can learn from someone who's a street sweeper all the way up to a CEO. Everyone has a story. Everyone has something that they can share that enhances other people's wealth and knowledge. So I really, that's the reason why I enjoy what I'm doing. First of all, not every day you could get a chance to talk to someone from all the way from a battalion commander all the way to a vlogger. There's a wide range of the people that could come and talk with me. So that's why I'm inviting you to come on and have a discussion with me. Let me interview you. Let me, share the opportunity with you on a little bit of a platform that I have. And, if you don't want to do it, that's fine as well. You could check it out. You could enjoy the show. You could see what we've got going on. But that's my makeup. That's how I like operating the way how I operate. And yeah, much it. So let me take off this. Let me take off the Bluetooth headphones, and let me go ahead and see if Emmanuel almost ready? Well, I sent him the link, so he's going to be here soon. As far as topics that we're going to talk about and things that he's already sent me, he sent me some stuff on autism, the racial divide in autism research, which is, I'm going to have my eyes and ears keen on this because I am a parent of a child who's on the spectrum. My oldest child, he has Asperger's, and this was diagnosed in Germany by an American doctor and a German doctor. And so I'm definitely going to keen my ears in on what Emmanuel has to share with us. He's also going to talk about COVID-19 information for autism. That should be kind of interesting. Home services for children with autism in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He's going to share some information on that. Professional and parent resources for special education. And then also he's going to talk more about different things that I'm sure others will be enjoying. So without further ado, here's Emmanuel once again. Hey, Emmanuel.
Hey, so is the sound a lot better now?
It's a whole lot better, man. It's a whole lot better.
Okay. The only thing is that I can actually hear myself a little bit, but that's all right.
Okay. Wait, hold on. Let me fix that. I can, so that we delay that sort of sound, I'm going to put on headphones myself also. And that will remove the sound so that there's basically what we're experiencing is an echo in the sound. And I mean, I understand that, things are kind of different as far as the way how we're communicating, but just like a professional in media and communications, we're not going to fall apart on our show. So let me play this and see if the sound is better on my end here. Audio will be through the mic through that, and the speakers will be through my built-in. So go ahead and talk with us. Emmanuel?
Okay, I'm glad to be back. I'm so sorry that that you guys weren't able to really hear what I was saying before, that it was distorted.
It's all right.
But I was just basically talking about my college experience and how I got to where I am. I think that was your question, how I arrived at becoming an educator coming out of college, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, like I said, I was very, very fortunate that even though I had a very expensive college education coming out of high school, I got so many different scholarships and financial opportunities that my debt was actually quite low. So like I said before, out of $115,000, I ended up only owing $9,700 in loans. Everything else was paid for by scholarships and grants. And I also mentioned previously that I had 4 different majors. I was a business major, information systems major, urban studies major, and a communications and media studies major. And I would not suggest to the young kids out there that that's how you do it, because that was stress.
I hear you. I hear you.
But actually, I also mentioned, my freshman year, I found out that I had kidney stones, and unfortunately, that's a battle I've been fighting over the last 20 something years, about 7 or 8 different attacks over that time. But when I graduated from college, my senior year, 9/11 happened. So as you can imagine, in New York City, for employment was just El Saco Grande, big time. It was no bueno. So I had a very difficult time getting a job. I went from September 2001 to February of 2004 without a job, without a paycheck. And thankfully, my mom was very understanding at that time. You know, she didn't say, "Hey, what are you doing putting sweat stains on my couch? Go out and get a job," or something like that. You know, she was just saying, "Listen, are you going on interviews every day? You know, or are you doing research every day?" You know, that was her main thing. She just wanted me to be active, you know. And my first big break was with Brooklyn College. There's a college program, or college readiness program called College Now. I don't know if you remember that, Otis.
I do not.
The College Now program. We had it at Jeff, but we weren't affiliated with Brooklyn College. We were affiliated with Kingsborough College. So it basically allowed high school students to take courses for college credit while they were still in high school. And either you would physically go to the campus, or your high school teacher delivered the syllabus. So I got hired as a College Now teaching scholar to kind of tutor kids at East New York Family Academy in East New York. And that's kind of like where I began my career education, just working with kids in the classroom, helping them how to write essays, write grammatically correct, and things like that, 5-paragraph, you know, essays and things like that. And from there, I moved on to becoming a substitute teacher, and then from a substitute teacher to a paraprofessional, or, you know, a teaching assistant. And then from there, I moved on to becoming a full-time teacher. But in the path of all that, I kind of stumbled into special education. You know, I first started off as a long-term sub teaching, you know, global history, marine biology, health. I was kind of like a Swiss Army knife. And what ended up happening was I was given a number of what you would call inclusion classes. So you would have classes in where part of the class was what would be considered as mainstream classes, mainstream students, I'm sorry. And then the other half of the class, or a portion of the class, were students with learning difficulties. But at East New York Family Academy at that time, honestly, it was more so a number of kids that had behavioral disorders, you know, kids, you know, who are maybe, you know, having a lot of issues with behavior management and anger control. And that was kind of like my first taste with that. And when I became a full-time teacher, it's one of those things in where I was like, you know, I could try to continue on with getting my certification to become a social studies teacher, or I could continue on with special education, because I really liked the inclusion classes that I had. And this is where George Bush, good old W, he kind of messed me up. So I'm sure you've probably heard of a bit of legislation.
What happened? No Child Left Behind.
No Child Left Behind. That's right. That's right. So my initial thought when I said, okay, I'm going to do this thing with teaching and education, at the time I was pursuing a master's in history, and I was, I think, at least a couple semesters away from finishing that. And he had set a deadline within that particular policy, within that legislation, and where you had to have your master's degree in education or your bachelor's degree in education. So before, you could, let's say, for example, have your accounting degree, but you could be a math teacher, even though your degree was in accounting, not math or education. And this bit of education, little stipulation said that you had to be considered highly qualified. In order to be highly qualified, you have to have a degree directly in education. And the deadline for that, I was not going to make it if I was going to continue with my traditional social studies and history program. So I quickly switched over to special education at Touro College. And I worked like a beast. I finished a 2-year program in 1 year. So thankfully at that time, I didn't have any kids or a wife or anything like that, because they'd have probably all left me. So I finished my degree in special education and general education in 2010. And that's kind of how I ended up in special education.
Okay. So I saw you sent me some topics that you obviously have done, I guess, either research or had experience in. And something that kind of piqued my interest was the racial divide in autism, CDC research. Did you do much reading on this racial divide link that you sent me? So, all right, let me switch cameras real fast. My son, my oldest son, was found to be autistic. He has, Asperger's, as I was told. Asperger's, right? And, a lot of folks at the time when I discovered it.
Asperger's, Okay, so we're having a issue with the sound. You're repeating yourself.
Is it still repeating? Hold on.
No, it's stopped.
This thing is just, I don't know, man. Maybe it's because you're in China, all of this is happening. How about now? Is it good? Is it good now?
Yep, we're good.
All right. So, people of color typically don't want
we're
to
good
have...
now.
All right. So the question is, people of color typically don't want to have their children in special education because they're often misdiagnosed. My son has been diagnosed with Asperger's, but we treat him no different than any other child. We love him the same, we care for him the same, et cetera, et cetera. Why do you think there's such a racial disparity regarding, or the racial divide in autism?
Well, thank you, Otis, for asking me that question. It's a very important question to ask. So as you see, with the link that you can provide the link earlier, there's something that is referred to as a prevalence ratio. That it's basically a ratio that shows that a one-to-one relationship is equal, right? And any variance that's 0.1 or higher or 0.1 or lower on the negative end shows like the relationship, right? So the prevalence ratio, amongst blacks and whites is 1.1 or higher. Amongst whites and Hispanic children, it's 1.2. And amongst black and Hispanic children, it's 1.1. So you can see in each case, it's higher for black people than it is for whites. And it's about the same, or it's a little higher between blacks and Hispanics as well. So part of the issue is, like you said, the stigma. People, if they think, oh, well, something doesn't seem right. My child doesn't give me eye contact. my child says weird things, has weird thoughts. My child has sensory issues with things like light, things like sound, things like being touched. And a lot of times these types of things are ignored. Of course, autism is a spectrum. So every autistic child is not going to have the same triggers as what you may see as a quote unquote textbook definition. You have some children who may be nonverbal, who may also have what we would refer to as like a depressed IQ, IQ below 72. And then you also have those who are considered, for lack of a better term, high functioning, except what they struggle with is things such as social interaction, and thinking very concretely and very literally, not being able to really grasp the idea of nuance or facial expressions or empathy and things like that, and kind of living in their own world. So with this, you have a lot of distrust in the Black community of various professionals saying, hey, listen, we're going to put your kid in special ed because in the past, this type of thing was done because of behavior, right? Oftentimes people would say, oh, why is your kid in special ed? Is your kid in special ed because of their behavior, or is it because they're dumb? And I think a lot of people just not wanting to have their kid associated with that type of imagery, that type of narrative is the problem. And then the other thing is too, one, the reporting is not the same. And then also too, where a lot of people live, especially in urban environments such as New York City, the facilities and the resources to get diagnosed is not readily available. So there are a lot of other contributing factors, there, but a lot of it is social stigma.
It's interesting. I'm as you're saying all these different things, I'm remembering, hell, you remember Thomas Jefferson High School. The 3rd floor was the special education floor that
Delta House. House.
Yeah, man. And people, hell, I remember back in Trinidad where I grew up, there was an entire room for the kids who didn't quite get it. I wasn't in that room. I was in the right room. So it created a very us versus them stigma growing up. And then, of course, going to Jefferson High School and then knowing about the 3rd floor where the special education students were, it created an even further us versus them sort of stigma. So, me being told that, hey, Otis, your child...
You know what, Otis, I'm man enough to admit...
Go ahead.
I'm man enough to admit when I'm wrong, and I will tell you now as a special education professional, when I was in high school and I was an immature 16, 17 years old, teenager, people would mention Delta House and you would laugh. It was kind of like a joke. I mean, it's something that I'm not overly proud of now, but it was one of those things, like you said, they were considered an other. If you say, oh, well, you taking classes in the 3rd floor with this particular room, you're in Delta House. We know that you're in Delta House. Ha ha. And
we were
I would like to say that society has grown past that. Yeah. Yeah.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It still goes on. I mean, here's the thing. There's a bit of a, we've kind of turned the corner to where we're trying to destigmatize a child who may be autistic, but that sort of us versus them divide is still there, and it's still prevalent, and it's still unfortunately very high in our community.
That's correct. That's correct. And the thing is, there are a number of things that inhibit us from helping the kids who need the most help. There are certain things such as early intervention services that when you have a child who is, for example, not reaching their milestones, for example, after a certain amount of time, the child should be able to look up and track your finger. The child should be able to sit up. should be able to walk. There are various milestones that your pediatrician should be looking at. And if there are delays, that's something in where you say, okay, we're not going to panic here, but let me find out if there's something more here. Let me see if my child needs to see an early interventionist. Let me see if I need to take my child to an educational psychologist, not a regular psychologist, but an educational psychologist where they can get psych testing done.
Mm-hmm. But what about parents who are in denial of all of this? How do we hold them accountable?
So on the front line is the special education teacher, and hopefully a very empathic, general education teacher, whether it's the homeroom teacher or a subject specialist or the administration. That's what you would hope would happen, that they would be the front line and saying, listen, as compared to the other children, I see your child is struggling with socialization. I see he or she is struggling with math or reading and things like that. And this is something that we need to explore further. So I think realistically, it's very difficult. I mean, for me, I don't have any children yet. I'm hoping to have some someday. Just got engaged. But for me, as a professional, it's easier to kind of pick out certain things and say, okay, let me target this earlier. But for the average parent who does not know anything about, dyslexia, autism, ADHD, this, that, and the other, I would not expect the average parent juggling everything else that they're juggling to know what the markers are. So I think at the front line, at the forefront, has to be the educational professionals at that school. And if not the educational professionals, maybe even the pediatrician of the child. Yeah. So when you're having these conversations with your doctor, you have to be very honest about what you're seeing and what you're not seeing.
Yeah, unfortunately, some parents are so much so in denial because they don't want to have, my child is fine, my child is okay. That unfortunately that child falls through the cracks simply because of a parent's ego, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't really, let's switch topics just for a little bit regarding COVID-19 information and autism. Talk to us about that topic that you brought up.
Okay, so we're all, dealing with this virus in various places around the world. I'm dealing with it here in China. You guys are dealing with it back at home in the States. And something that's come up quite a bit on my end is questions that I've gotten from parents and various forums on how to help your child navigate through this new norm. Mm-hmm. As you probably know for yourself, a lot of children with autism, they like routine. Yes, yes. Having to change, that routine can actually be a disruptive trigger for them behavior-wise. So the thing is, when you remove the routine of school with them being away from maybe their cognitive behavior therapist and, their special pullouts to the resource room and things like that. And then just the routine of being around their friends, the routine of getting up in the morning, going to school, all that is very disturbing and disruptive. So what I did was I looked up some resources through autismspeaks.org. And I just wanted to provide that link to the people who are watching, because they have resources there in a very stratified kind of way. So what they do is they have resources for you if you are an educator, a parent, or a student, and just various things and approaches as to how to address that. So for example, what I've been advising parents to do during this time is to create a schedule. Mm-hmm. And I know that seems very simple, but especially if you have a very young child who doesn't really understand a lot through words. Like I said, a lot of words lose meaning for certain students with things like Asperger's. A lot of things may go over their head in terms of the very concrete way in where they see the world. So if you have a very small child, creating a type of visual schedule to kind of keep them on track and being consistent with that. You know, and also having things like mindfulness routines, and where they are going through social thinking scenarios such as, okay, you know, is this a intended or unintended consequence of your actions? Is this a weird thought? Okay, it's okay to have a weird thought. How do we express it? What is the emotional vocabulary? So all these types of resources are out there on that particular link that I provided with you in terms of how to replicate some type of normalcy and routine for children who are stuck inside.
Okay, let me, I know you sent me the resources, so as a good provider of knowledge and information, I'm going to share those links with the others, with everyone. Come on now, where is it at? And hold on, give me a second. You know, I'll tell you what. Here's an awesome thing, and here's a great thing about why being married to someone who is very organized helps. My wife actually sent me. She actually created a schedule for my son, for both of my sons actually, to keep them on schedule and also to help with, you know, organization, etc. And so she has created an actual little physical, I guess, schedule sheet for my oldest son to follow. So let me pull up this link that you sent me, and then I'll share it with everyone who could you know, possibly get something from it. So I saw another thing that you mentioned. Talk to us about how, you know, talk to us about your lockdown time in China, as much as you can share with us.
Okay, so my lockdown time in China, look, I'm not going to try to make light of what you guys are dealing with stateside, you know, because you guys are suffering and things as well. But when I look at all the protests and things that are going on, and I'm saying they have no idea of what a real lockdown looks like. So my lockdown came in multiple parts. So for Chinese New Year, my fiance and I, at that time, you know, she was my girlfriend. She didn't know I was going to pop the question. We decided to go to Bali on January 21st. And we went there, had a great time. She said yes. And we got back on January 29th. And while we were in Bali, we were hearing, you know, all these weird stories about some type of virus in China, this, that, and the other. And I didn't even know about it. I had to get a call from my brother who was all worried about me. And I said, "What virus? I don't know what you're talking about. Everything was fine when we left." And sure enough, when I came back, they were like, you're going to stay your butt inside. So here's what happened. So when we got back, the rules were changing every other day. Sometimes they were changing by the hour. And it got to the point in where at first we were able to go outside to, you know, get food and things like that. And then they restricted it so bad in where you could only leave your apartment once every 3 days. And it was one person at a time. You had to show like a special card, which had numbers on it to show your particular day to go out. And if that wasn't your particular day, you know, the guards are going to give you a hard time. And if you acted up, you get the police called on you. And trust me, you don't want to be in anybody's Chinese jail. That is not a good look. It doesn't matter if you black, Chinese, white, whatever. You don't want to be in a Chinese jail. So we were never
while we're here arguing and protesting, thinking that, you know, we should have the right to get out and do what we got to do. Over in China, it was way more restricted.
Yeah. And I'm almost forgetting one of the more important parts. So when we got back from Bali, we couldn't even get home. we had to wait the following day because Otis, they were checking every single car coming out of the airport on the highway with temperature checks. So the traffic from the airport lasted hours. And if you were going anywhere onto the highway to the airport or in the direction of the airport, every single person in the car had their temperature checked. Can you imagine if everybody driving on the highway had to have their temperature checked and stopped while they were on the road? You know, so it was. Our issue was more so making sure that we had enough water because we can only go out once every 3 days. So making sure that we had enough bottled water because you can't drink the water here. You can't drink the tap water. It's not good, and it's not healthy for you. It'll make you sick. So water was our biggest concern here. Yeah, it's not safe. Yeah. Yeah, so that was quarantine number one. Quarantine number two was I went to Thailand because we got tired of those conditions for about a little over a month. And I also did not want to spend my 40th birthday in Xi'an under those types of conditions. So we said, where's someplace safe, someplace cheap, and someplace that will allow us in, because a number of countries are actually starting to close off their borders to anybody coming out of China. So we ended up going to Thailand, ended up having a wonderful 40th birthday celebration for me down in Phuket. Got some medical stuff done, yay, medical tourism. And when we got back, wow, that was just a hellish experience. That was far worse than the quarantine that I originally experienced getting back from Bali. So
what was hellish about it?
My fiance Gia, she has a different work schedule. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you about it now. So my fiance Gia, she has a different work schedule than I do. So a lot of her work is heavily, focused on the weekend, and mine, even though I'm working online, is during the week. So I decided, okay, I'll leave on Sunday, she'll leave on Monday, and we'll meet up in Xi'an on Tuesday. That's not how it ended up happening. All the flights from Thailand to China ended up being canceled that Monday, and we ended up getting separated. So when I arrived in China, I noticed that I had a gap between flying from Shanghai back to Xi'an. So what's a person to do? Okay, I'm going to have an overnight gap. I'm going to rent a hotel. I rented a hotel, and I got there, and they said, sorry, boss, your reservation has been canceled. And I said, canceled? What are you talking about? I said, no Americans. And I said, no Americans? Having an American passport has never been a problem for me. If anything, it's always been a plus. And, I argued back and forth, and I told the lady, listen, I'm tired. My flight, is at 7-something in the morning. So that means I got to be to the airport by like 4:30, stop playing with me. And she's just like, sorry, this is our new policy. We're not taking American passports. So I had to end up sleeping at the airport, from about 12:30 until it was time for me to leave. And then I get to the airport, and it was cold, had to deal with a lot of screening, people not understanding what I was saying, me not understanding what they were saying, plastic all over the place, stuff being sprayed, my bags being sprayed, me being sprayed, and I had to, kind of endure those conditions until my flight left at 7-something in the morning. But then when I got to China, that's when the real the real hell kind of ensued. So they put me in this quarantine center that was quite unsanitary. I said to myself, if I don't get COVID, I'll end up getting something else in this quarantine center. And I was there for 10 hours. And I have to give a huge shout out to my school, because they sent translation help for me. They sent somebody from my school to help me with translation, and that really did speed things along. I know it may seem like, wow, you were there for 10 hours. What do you mean it sped things along? Trust me, it did, because if I didn't have that, I'd have been dead in the water. So I had to wait at a quarantine center for 10 hours, and I kept telling them that I had not been to America, and they kept getting it confused. It says, oh, you American, so no, you have to stay here. And I said, I haven't been to America since July. What are you talking about? And they just gave me a hard time. So they put me in a quarantine hotel. And thankfully, I got there just before the deadline, and where the government had stopped paying for people's hotel quarantine. So thankfully, my quarantine stay at the hotel was free. But I dealt with all sorts of things. I dealt with a massive amount of heat, because they had the air conditioning set for heat at that time, and it's central air. So they said, no, this is not going to change until like sometime in March. And I said, you got to be later in March. You got to be kidding me. So, you know, I was basically being roasted every day in that room. People, you know, with their cigarette smoke coming through the vents, people playing their loud music through the vents. I was also informed that my sheets and towels would not be changed. So I had to sleep, you know, in the same sheets and covers, and use the same towels over and over and over again. And then the food. I got food poisoning my first 2 days. And I think I don't need to get too graphic as to what happens when you have food poisoning, but going through the biological processes of being food poisoned, I lost about five pounds of water weight in 2 days. Just dealing with a lot of nonsense.
It looks like we got some comments coming in. It's not popping up on the app like it usually does. It's popping up on a separate screen. So let me read off the comments. It's okay. It comes from McCluster West. What's going on, Chicken? He said, is talking about Thailand actually taboo in China? We hear it on the news here a lot. Is that true?
Talking about Thailand?
Yeah.
No. Talking about Thailand is not taboo in China, but the thing is, I will say I would rather not get into any type of political or controversial conversations about China, being that I live currently in China. But talking about Thailand in China, I think is fine. It's it's not a problem.
So then I should probably not ask about this. This is a personal question for me. We saw in the news where men of color, well, people of color, period, were not being allowed to go to restaurants and stuff like that. What was that all about?
Okay, so I'm going to speak in very general terms here. And I can touch on a little bit, but I'm not going to get too in depth because, like I said, I live here. So
tracking.
So generally speaking, there were some issues in where I saw in some of my group chats on WeChat about various restrictions that were being put into place in various places, such as, you know, restrictions on movement, restrictions on restaurants and things like that. My own personal experience was not that. The only thing that I've experienced is there's an app called Didi, which is basically Chinese Uber. And, you know, sometimes when you would try to schedule a ride, you know, there were some issues with that because you have to enter in your passport number or your Chinese ID, and I think the drivers can possibly see, that, oh, this is not a Chinese ID. So, that's been somewhat problematic. But honestly, that was a couple of weeks ago. And since then, I haven't had any issues with that. There were some general issues with foreigners here, but the stuff that I think that your commenter is talking about, a lot of that stuff was reported in other cities. As far as what I've personally seen in Xi'an, that has really not been the case on any wide scale. I'll also say that I don't think that that's anything that's been government sanctioned. I think that's just been people going on their own and deciding to discriminate or do whatever they feel is right in that situation. And we're just dealing with a lot of xenophobia and things during this time, but I have not personally experienced that.
Okay. Well, I think, Emmanuel, I really appreciate what you've brought to us as far as information, as far as living in China, as far as traveling abroad, as far as autism information, and even dealing with the racial biases in autism care. We really appreciate that. I do want you to come back again. Next time we'll have all these little kinks and everything worked out then. But in parting, I want to allow you to just share, words of encouragement or words of information that people could go on regarding getting a chance to even travel and teach in China at later dates when this whole thing kind of takes care of itself. And also traveling abroad, just encouraging words that you could offer us.
Okay, I'll try to encapsulate this and distill it as tightly as I can in the time we have left. So one other thing as well that I want people to be aware of, even when you would take a DD, up until, I guess, 2 days ago, if you were in a taxi or in a DD, there would be a plastic partition between you and the driver. And now we are being tracked using scan codes everywhere. So for people, who are complaining about this, that, and the other, I know it's tough, but everywhere we go, you're tracked. They track your phone. And if you do not present your phone and a green, healthy code, you can't go anywhere. So, for people who are saying, it's so rough, it's so hard, I want to go to the beach and things, part of how we were able to get our numbers down, and I know a lot of people are disputing, how real the numbers are, this, that, and the other, but part of how we've been able to flatten the curve here is just by taking some very, very tough measures. And it really has hurt this country economically as it's hurting the US, but this too shall pass. In regards to traveling and things, I have to say that, first of all, I'm incredibly blessed to have a job as an educator that affords me the paid time off to travel. And then the other thing is, there are a lot of people who fear the unknown, especially as people of color. And when you say, well, okay, so let's take the opportunity to live in another country. For a lot of people, that prospect is a very scary thing. For a lot of people, they say, the best life I can live is in the United States. And I have to say, you know what? Of course, other people will have different opinions, but I've been living my best life since living abroad. 2013, I've lived in, 4 different countries now. And honestly, I probably don't see myself coming back for at least another 15 years plus. And I know that's going to disappoint some of my family and friends who are watching, but I feel like that I have so much more available to me professionally, economically, culturally. And when you live abroad, it's so cheap to travel and to visit so many countries. So for what may be a drive to Florida for you or a drive to the next state over, you might be able to hit 2 or 3 different countries because the countries are so close. And for people who say, well, Emmanuel, travel is very expensive, I'd say take a look at your budget. Take a look at what you actually spend money on. How much of it do you spend going to the club? How much of it do you spend on cigarettes or other recreational things? And think about, okay, whether or not you want to provide yourself or your children or your significant other with cultural experiences around the world. I tell friends of mine, you can start out very simple. Go to Canada, go to Mexico, go to the West Indies, start out there. You don't have to be big balling and visit, Rome, or London or Rio de Janeiro to start off. You can start with small trips and just start prioritizing. And then also too, I'm a part of something called Black Travel Movement on Facebook. It's a wonderful group that shares experiences and advice on.
No. Time out on that group. I got some information to share with you about that. Yeah.
Sure.
So we're going to hold off on the Black Travel Movement, and we'll talk more about that privately.
Okay. Well, my main advice is whether it's joining a group on Facebook or creating a group with your friends and things, being involved with like-minded people. That's more so the point that I'm making there. Just seeing that encouragement of other, of traveling. It doesn't even have to be a Black group. It can be any type of group. It could be something like, so if you're into a particular interest, like I have a friend of mine who, he's a huge Star Trek fan, and he did the Star Trek cruise, I think a year or so ago. Absolutely loved it, right? And so it could even be something that is tailored to something that you like, with photography, education, whatever. There are plenty of travel groups that are themed based on the types of things that you would like to do, or like-minded people or whatever. So it's completely enriched my life, and something that my fiance and I, we've talked about a lot, is providing these types of opportunities for our children, so they can say, yeah, I've been to the Roman Colosseum. Yeah, I've been to the Serengeti. Yeah, I've been to South Africa and I've visited the Great Wall, and I've seen, like me personally, I don't know if you've ever heard of the 7 modern wonders of the world. I've visited 4 of them, 4 out of 7, so I just encourage anybody, no matter what your cultural or economic background, make travel a priority when the world opens up again, when you feel like it's safe enough to be around other people.
Okay. Well, Emmanuel, I appreciate you showing up. I'm going to have you back on again so that we could talk some more with better communication, of course, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you. And hopefully the next time we speak, I won't be rocking my quarantine hair and my quarantine beard. And just everybody, just stay safe out there.
It's going to be sooner than later.
Yeah, I just want everybody at home to stay safe, especially to my family, out in New York City. I know that you guys are really struggling out there. So God bless you all and stay safe.
All right. Take it easy.
All right. Bye-bye.
And that was another one. We had a good discussion with Emmanuel. We apologize about the communications issue. Heck, we were even supposed to, I thought our interview was tomorrow. So I'm glad that he reached out to me and we made it happen. But, we're going to have another one with him. We're going to make it better. We're going to make that production a little bit better. But, as I always say in parting, take care of yourself, take care of your family, and take care of others. Peace.